fiscal year and the budget year of 2011 and 12. Just to recap our work of yesterday, the committee took action to move forward $4.5 billion of solutions. $3.7 billion of the 4.5 were cuts, the largest ones being $1.5 billion in Medi-Cal, $1 billion from the late fees to pay the GO bond debt, and then another $1 billion from Proposition 10. The other non-cut solutions were mostly represented by the $810 million in loans from the truck weight fees. That's about 90% of the governor's proposal, and it is quite likely that after we conclude our work today, that $4.5 billion in solutions will grow by another $2.2 billion. So some of the larger ticket items will be on our agenda tomorrow, but we are certainly on our way and making good progress. And at our Vice Chair, Senator Huff's request, information he had desired yesterday has been shared with the Republican caucus, and so we're looking for smooth sailing today. Of course, Senator.
And these are difficult times for all of us. Nobody's comfortable with where we have to go, but it's the nature of the state budget. And so I do want to thank the chair and your staff for working more with us and helping get the information that helps our members make these tough decisions. Thank you.
Good. So on agenda today, we'll start with Human Services, moving on to other health programs, public safety, and then finally higher education. We're going to start with public health and then move on to Human Services. And first things first, if you could call the roll, please.
Leno.
Here.
Huff.
Here.
Alquist. Here. Anderson. Desaulniers.
Here.
Emerson. Evans.
Here.
Fuller.
Here.
Hancock.
Here.
Lamalfa.
Here.
Blue.
Here.
Lowenthal.
Here.
Rubio. Semidian. Wolk. Wright.
Here.
We have our quorum, and just to clarify, page 1, of course, is with the Department of Public Health, followed by Public Safety, Higher Education, and then finally Human Services. So, Department of Public Health.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I'm Jose Ortiz, Chief Deputy Director over Operations for the Department of Public Health. We're going to have a number of our Deputy Directors here to present on the particular items, and it'll be very quick.
Good morning, Senator Leno. I'm Acting Deputy Director for the Center for Healthcare Quality, Pam Dickfoss. And the first two items of general fund savings that are identified on the list are from my center. The first is $2.3 million general fund savings from the state works to oversee the state facilities unit that we've identified. And the second is from the Laboratory Field Services Division, $227,000. Both of these items will not affect the core direct services that we provide to oversight these activities.
Thank you. I know you've been very much of assistance working with our staff, and $2.3 million is real money.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. So that is one, and then Laboratory Field Division?
Yes, number two is Laboratory Field Division. We can give up $227,000 without impacting the core activities that we're providing in that program.
Very good. Thank you. Then you're also dealing with the Health Information Survey?
No.
That's someone else. All right.
Yes.
So we've got Dr. Lynette Scott to present on the Health Information System.
Great. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you. My name's Dr. Scott with the Health Information Strategic Planning, and we appreciate the guidance from the committee in terms of looking at other funding sources for this. At this point in time, we don't have other funding sources identified. It is a survey that is important for evaluating the different populations in our state, subpopulations at the geographic level of counties, and is used by county and local and state levels for evaluation of services, where to place services, and how to improve those in a cost-effective way. Thank you.
Are there some Prop 63 monies that can be used for this?
So this is one of many funding sources that currently go towards this, and so we would like to evaluate other funding sources that may be used within the
Okay.
the department.
Very good, thank you.
Brandon Nunes, Department of Finance. I believe Dr. Scott can actually speak to issue number 6 as well.
If you want to skip ahead.
Save your trip, go right ahead. Number
Okay.
6, that is County Health Services section.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. This funding has supported local programs that have assisted in counties. Many of those programs, as noted by the committee, have no longer received funding. We've used this funding to continue to support county services, in particular with responding to the new directives from the federal level related to electronic health records and high-tech, as well as healthcare reform. The funding's been used to pursue federal dollars through grant programs that we've received. We did receive $1 million less than originally requested from the grant that has been previously heard here. And so the funding is helping to develop the means necessary at the county level to use the electronic health records, electronic information, to reduce duplication of care, and in particular to be able to address our vulnerable populations and the direct care coordination of patients among those entities. And again, we will be looking at other funding sources in the future as the committee has suggested, and appreciate your consideration.
The federal funds are what allow us to do this.
So
Finance?
This is actually all general fund. They received healthcare reform grants to do similar work. I think Dr. Scott was mentioning that there was $1 million less for that particular proposal, but it's for those similar activities.
Very good. Okay. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So if we could just have a brief overview of the remaining items 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 from Finance, please.
Yes. Brandon Nunes, Department of Finance. Issue number 4 is related to the maternal, child, and health. There's currently a $1.7 million reserve of the Title V funds that can be used within the Department of Healthcare Services to achieve general fund savings there. Issue number 5 is related to a Valley Fever contract that the department has. As committee staff recognizes, it's been intermittent over the years. I think the last couple of years it's been funded. The prior years there was no funding for this particular these operations.
And the question would be whether this is a state responsibility.
Yeah, it would typically. I think it's at the federal and the private levels where these.
Okay. Number 6.
Number 6,
We
Dr.
did
Scott
7,
did cover,
right?
and number 7 is related to a general operating expense reduction within the department that can likely be managed through travel, training reductions, and overhead reductions within the department. So we've identified that $1 million
Okay.
there. Issue number 8 is related to healthcare surge costs. As you're aware, within the governor's budget, there was a proposal to no longer fund healthcare surge activities. This is two positions and state operations costs that are still associated with those activities. So this would be consistent with the governor's proposal to if that funding were removed. Issue number 9 is just a small amount of local assistance within the environmental management program, $32,000. It's not being currently utilized.
And then this fund repayment.
The fund repayment is related to $6 million that can be repaid for general fund support that occurred in 1996-97. This is the ability for that fund to repay those general funds, and likely budget bill language would be needed to operationalize this, but it would be feasible.
And might this number be even larger?
It's possible. The department is currently assessing that number to see if it could be higher.
Okay. Very good. So the recommendation to is approve these reductions. Any thoughts of any readjustments? Do you want to go ahead, Lenny? Senator Hancock?
Thank you, Senator Leno. I would move the item, but on number 3, reduce the cut by $100,000.
So the reduction then would be 572 instead of 672.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the total would be 14,327.
14,327, is that your motion?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Senator Huff.
Yes, these, as I understand, were not governor's proposal, but reductions, which were okay in principle. We do have some concerns with items 4 and 10, which are fund shifts and taking the place of spending reductions. So we would prefer to lay off on those two items, to use a term from yesterday, without prejudice.
All right. 4 and 10.
No, we just voted.
Senator Wright.
The 100,000 differential, what is that reflecting?
Go ahead.
An ongoing attempt to try to backfill with foundation money, and a few days to work on that.
Okay, so we're doing it as a placeholder now, but we're not reducing the cut amount by the 100,000, but we hope that they can find other cash to...
We're reducing the cut by 100,000 because that allows us to move the discussion to next week, and it gives us a few days to try to find that other money.
Okay.
There's some questions whether there is foundation money. We don't want this program to evaporate.
Gotcha.
Yeah. All right, so then the motion would be to save $14,327,000, as Senator Saulnier has pointed out. And this will be without objection, though with the exception of items 4 and 10, with the Republicans abstaining, without prejudice. Thank you. Moving on to page 6. We welcome the Department of Developmental Services. Director Delgadillo, it's always good to see you. I hope Senator Saulnier has been treating you appropriately this year with full respect in my absence.
Very much so.
That's the right answer. But I couldn't fill his shoes.
So I know you have a number of proposals here. We'll try to cover them as quickly as possible because they are many.
And Mr. Chairman, before we do that, if I could just introduce a group of visitors from the Sacramento Adventist Academy who are here in the gallery. I wanted to point out that they were here, and I told them that we might be boring, but it was important nonetheless. So they're here to see us do the job.
Speak for yourself, Senator.
There you go. All right.
Well, if I remember yesterday, Senator, you were the one who were born. All of us were lying.
Now, let's take a deep breath.
So we have a summary on page 6, and this is very much about finding some money through accountability and transparency, making sure we have no waste, fraud, abuse in the system.
Yes. Mr. Chairman and members, thank you for the opportunity to come before you today. I was actually hoping not to be back before you this year with cuts significant like we experienced last year. I am Terry Delgadillo. I'm the Director of the Department of Developmental Services, for those of you I have not met. The department serves about 246,000 consumers. Most of them live in the community, served through 21 regional centers. About 1,958 live in 4 state-operated developmental centers and 1 community facility. The first item before you today is related to developmental centers, and it is additional savings. The first two, item number 1 and number 2, are items that we've identified savings in the developmental centers due to unit consolidations that we anticipate and program consolidations, and so we're definitely in support of those. As noted, as the committee consultant has noted on the page, we do have some concern with the reduction to Lanterman Developmental Center positions. We are in the process of closing Lanterman Developmental Center. We are in the governor's budget proposing 216 positions be eliminated from there, but we did ask to retain 88 positions. We do believe with this reduction it will have an impact on the process. We will have to consolidate living units at the facility more frequently than we would like, but we do understand the budget situation.
And even with our alteration, there still will be 60 additional.
That's correct.
That's right. Okay.
She's going to go through all the pages and it'll get confusing, so why don't you save her on page 7?
Okay. All right. Go right ahead.
The next item, which is on page 8, which is part of the same issue, is an additional $3 million that we anticipate receiving as a result of getting the new facility at Porterville Developmental Center certified for Medicaid. Currently, that facility, which is behind a fence, is not eligible. We believe we will be able to secure those funds.
Okay, so we're going to take these first 4 items with the additional savings in the developmental centers amounting to $16.2 million, and this is above the governor's budget. So that would be the recommendation.
And I would move that.
All right. Senator Huff.
Yes, we're supporting the motion on this, but just would request of the chair, when we're going through these things, when there's items that were not voted on in subcommittee, to just highlight that. That's helpful, as we're kind of doing this whole process in a compressed manner, a little bit on the fly, because trying to get things on the ballot. But 1, 2, and 3, my understanding, were not voted on. 4 was in subcommittee.
That is correct.
Thank you.
All right. Senator Wright.
The question of the Ms. Delgadillo?
Yes.
Our city attorney used to be named Delgadillo.
Oh, yes, there was a city attorney, not related, sir.
Like not one of those names you hear every day, but I'm sorry. On the residential side, does this reduce the payment that we make to the people who are operating board and care homes? Does it?
These changes that we're talking about here are in the state-operated developmental centers, so the reductions here affect the state-operated facilities.
So it doesn't impact those community, like my district, I probably have 75 or 100 board and care facilities that contract with the regional centers. So this doesn't impact the reimbursement rate. Okay.
Not this item.
Senator, all 4 of these are specifically developmental center savings.
Gotcha. Okay. When I saw residents and care, I was confused because I didn't know if that meant the state or the community portion. Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
So I think without objection on these first 4 items on page 7 and 8. Page 9, which is with regards to developmental center capital outlay requests.
Mr. Chairman and members, the first item, and I'll go a little slower, the first item before you today, which was discussed in subcommittee but not voted on, relates to the Fairview Developmental Center, which is located in Costa Mesa. The request is to reappropriate funds that were appropriated previously to complete the construction of the fire alarm system. The funding was supposed to be encumbered by June 30th of last year because the plans weren't ready. It was not able to be encumbered. The statute said if it wasn't encumbered by then, we had to come back before the legislature. So this is previously appropriated funds. The issue at Fairview Developmental Center is that they have multiple systems and none of the systems are connected, and the fire alarms are so old they can't repair them. In one 3-month period, we had 23 false alarms. And so now people don't know whether they have a real fire or not. We actually had 2 fires in the last year, and it's made it really difficult, and we're very concerned about health and safety. I do appreciate the committee consultant's comment on this page where she's asking, as a result of the unit and program closures that we identified, will that affect this? We do believe, we had a chance late last night to look at this, we do believe that it would have about a $693,000 savings that's associated with the fact we can close units at Fairview that we would then not have to put the fire alarm system into. But we are very concerned that without these fire alarms that we've got big health and safety issues at the facility, and licensing has raised these issues as well as the fire marshal.
Director Delgadillo, I think your comments are well received. Fire safety is of utmost importance, of course. We're talking about $8.6 million general fund dollars, which were put into the Budget Act of 2008. So if it's of such great importance, what's happened in the past 3 years?
Actually, and I can defer to finance, who understands this better than I, but when construction projects are approved, we have to put in preliminary plans and drawings, and then they go out to bid, and then the construction happens. It was part of that whole package that was funded all at once, and the preliminary and plans and drawings were delayed, and they weren't approved in time to meet the June 30th, 2010 deadline. But I would defer to the experts from finance on cap outlay, because that's definitely not my area of expertise.
Yes, Finance.
Carlos Ochoa, Department of Finance. The project did realize a 7-month delay throughout the design process, and that was in part by using an outside firm to finish the working drawings portion. What we do hope is that this project will be ready to go to bid, and working drawings will be complete April of this year. So with the reappropriation, we would hope that we can move forward with an approved budget.
And how does this jive with the administration's intent to consolidate both programs and units?
This, Mr. Chairman, if I might, we do believe, as soon as we got the agenda last night, and we appreciate the consultant's comment here, we then worked with Finance again this morning. We do believe that we could save almost $700,000 off of that by consolidating the units down there. This facility, however, is getting about 30% of the people coming into the developmental centers where the court has determined the community can't meet the needs of them at that time. Because the facility actually has services for dually diagnosed individuals, and it also is the only program serving young adults and juveniles that aren't placed behind the fence at Porterville. And so, again, the facility has continued to have significant need. Also, with the closure of Lanterman, as we look at each individual person, we believe some of those people will be moving to Fairview.
Though we also, in the broader conversation of the future of our developmental centers and the great risk to all of our regional centers, which we know provide services at a much greater savings to the state, and we're going to be getting into that in just a moment, we don't really know exactly how many more years any further investment into this facility will actually have life. There's an uncertainty there.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, the department at this point is really focused on closure of Lanterman. We learned a lot from the closure of Ag News, which I think we did pretty well, but it took us a number of years, about 7 years, to get through that process. And at this point in time, we have to develop community capacity. The courts looked at each of these individuals and has determined that the community can't at that time meet their needs. And part of what we do is we work with the regional centers who have done an excellent job developing opportunities in the community. But as all of us move through this horrific budget, as you know, when we get further in the budget, the community is strained as well. And to assume that they can take on additional capacity, I mean, closing Lanterman is going to be a huge undertaking for everybody with the constraints that we're going to have looking at the budget.
Okay.
So we really do urge approval.
Points well taken. Just to make mention as we move on to the second item that the Assembly did deny this issue.
The second item on the agenda is the automatic fire sprinklers. The federal government has issued a directive for all nursing facilities and acute care facilities that they have to have automatic fire sprinklers by August of 2013. The developmental centers that we operate today are nursing facilities and acute care. To the degree that we do not have those in place, we will be losing $6 million a month in federal Medicaid funding. So in order for us to get the sprinklers in place to continue the federal funding, we urge approval.
And then the third item is the Sonoma Developmental Center's medical gases and oxygen.
Yes, the Sonoma Developmental Center, we are requesting $2.5 million associated with piping in oxygen to the living units. Currently, the living units do not, this facility does not have piped oxygen like other developmental centers. They have one living unit that has tubes coming in the wall, but they have buckets or bottles sitting outside. But the rest of the units, they're bringing 500 to 600 pound oxygen tanks onto the living unit every single day and changing them out for the individuals, and it's creating a life safety issue. We've had tops break off, and one of them, I guess, became a projectile, I learned since the last hearing. And so we are concerned that we have a health and safety risk at Sonoma if we do not move forward with piping in the oxygen.
Okay. Good presentation. Thank you. Committee members, none of these items, though all were discussed in subcommittee, none of them had votes taken. The Assembly did reject the Fairview alarm request and approve the other two. That is the recommendation. Do we have a motion? Senator Huff.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Republican recommendation is to be no on item 1, aye on number 2. If you would care to bifurcate the vote or just reflect it that way.
Okay, we can certainly do that.
Okay.
So if we could take votes on number 1 separately and then 2 and 3 together. So the motion on number 1 is to...
Let me clarify something real quick before we do that. So are you, just to be sure, because I was engaged
We can take
over
3
here.
votes if you like.
Maybe 4? No. On item 1, what is the recommended action?
It's to reject the proposal.
Yes on that. Yeah. Okay, then we're a yes. We're good.
Okay,
Sorry.
so on
we're
item
good.
number 1 is without objection. Number 2 is the automatic fire sprinklers at all 3 of the developmental centers, and the motion is to accept that, to approve the request.
Yeah, we're good. Sorry.
And that is without objection, and the third also to accept without exception.
We're no on number 3.
Okay, so Democrats, aye. Republicans, no on the third item. Thank you, Director. Moving on to page 11.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members, when the department prepared the budget this year, we prepared it the normal way. We looked at caseload growth, utilization growth, and in doing so, we projected we'd have about a $300 million increase in expenditures in our area throughout our department. As you know, the governor's budget is proposing a significant general fund reduction of $750 million within our department. Associated with that $750 million are the items that we did just discuss. In addition, we have recommended a number of pieces of trailer bill. These areas of trailer bill have to do with issues that came up via a Bureau of State Audits report, also hearings that were held in the last couple of years by the legislature, our own audits, and whistleblower complaints that we've received concerning issues at the regional centers. So the items before you, the first recommended trailer bill that we have put forward, all of these have savings associated with them. In total, about $109.7 million general fund. The first item before you has to do with a recommendation
Director, just one moment. First of all, thank you and to the administration for your good work. This is a significant savings, $109.7 million, and really getting at the core of how we can best deliver these services, which are so very important, but most effectively and cost efficiently. So very, very appreciative of your work. So we'll move on to page 12, which is the first of the 5 items, the administrative cost cap.
So the first item before you is a recommendation to prioritize in these really tight budget times the funding that we have available for the direct services. This recommendation is that for both the regional centers and the service providers where the regional centers negotiate rates, that no more than 15% of the expenditures be spent on administrative expenditures so that we make sure that the direct services, the client services, are the priority. We are assuming a total general fund savings of $39.5 million in this area.
Terrific. That is much appreciated. We hear a lot from our constituents in our districts about, as we continue to trim the purchase of services, that we make sure that as little money is spent on administration as possible. So that's what this is doing. Savings of $39.5 million. The recommendation is to have trailer bill language to accept these savings, achieve these savings. So moved. That is the motion.
Are you going to be taking these
Well, I'll take them one at a time, sure.
Okay. For pages 12 through 16, let me just state what we would like to do is just split the vote. We'll yes to the savings, hold off on the trailer bill language. We don't know what the language is. There are times when we've had some concerns about the language, so without prejudice, we will hold off and then,
Very good.
Yeah, I used that once before. Thank you, Senator Smitty.
Mr. Chair, Sean Martin with the Legislative Analyst's Office. Based on an initial review of the trailer bill language, we don't have any major issues. However, we haven't received the fiscal detail on how the savings associated with each piece of trailer bill language are derived, and so we're withholding a recommendation on the savings. We just haven't seen the detail yet.
So noted. Thank you, Ellie. So on the this one and the succeeding 4, we will take 2 votes, one on the trailer bill language and the other on the acceptance of the savings. And on the first item, A, It is unanimous on the savings, Democrats on the trailer bill, Republicans abstaining. So the next one, page 13, is dispute resolution relative to third-party liability.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members. The department is by law supposed to provide services as the payer of last resort, meaning that we are only supposed to be purchasing services in the community if there's not another payer that provides for that. Currently today, while the regional centers may identify a service need of an individual and that individual may have insurance, they will recommend that the family go to their insurance company and get the insurance company to pay the cost. If the insurance company does not pay it, even though it's part of what we all normally receive in our package, there's no right of recourse for the state or for the regional center to collect that money. The recommendation here is for the Department of Developmental Services and the regional centers to have the same ability that is currently in existence for Medi-Cal in order to be able to collect for expenditures that are part of the existing health plans. I want to emphasize this is not changing what the health plans cover. We're not suggesting expansion of that. We're just saying if it's a covered service, now today the only way that it gets covered is if the family is able to prevail with the insurance company, and many of these families are struggling just to survive, let alone push back on the insurance company to get payment. So the recommendation here is that we would have the same, as I mentioned, as Medi-Cal. Just to give you a sense, in the past 2 years, we've sent over 1,000 requests to insurance companies. In 8-9, we got $0, and in 7-8, we got $813. So we truly believe we need additional authority.
$10.5 billion is better than 813.
Absolutely.
Million, excuse me, yes, is better than 813.
We spent more doing the mailing, I think.
So using the same motion as for item A, which would be to split the trailer bill language from the achievable savings, the vote would be unanimous on the savings, Democrats aye on the trailer bill, Republicans abstaining. Item C is on page 14.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members, this trailer bill is recommending expanded audit requirements. Currently today, regional centers are required to annually have an independent audit, and every other year the department conducts an audit of them. The first component of this trailer bill language would require them to change or alternate the entity doing their audit, so they can't have the same company forever. This was a recommendation of a former colleague of yours, Assemblymember Delatorre, at a hearing that happened in the fall with Senator Lieu as well. The second component of this trailer bill language would require that providers have an independent audit or an independent review. And we discussed this at length in the subcommittee. Currently, what we had recommended was if you are $250,000 or more in income from the regional center, you need an independent review. If you have $350,000 or more, you would need an audit. Or 500, I'm sorry, Senator Alquist suggested we might want to reduce it. I know that's an item open before the committee. We believe we would save $21.5 million. Not only will it identify problems with providers, but it will also help the department and the regional center focus their limited audit staff on those providers that are at risk.
Great idea. Senator Alquist.
I just wanted to say thank you on that, because I think $250,000 is a lot of money, and I think if the providers understand, vendors understand that we're really going to be looking at this, that there may be some additional savings. Thank you.
Great. So just to make note for all committee members, all of these issues in DDS were discussed and debated in subcommittee, but no votes were taken in subcommittee. So without objection, we would... And if we were, per Senator Alquist's suggestion, to reduce this to $250,000 threshold?
We'd be supportive of that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So, Senator Salje says that's, again, the right answer. Okay. So would you like to make the motion then?
I move.
All right. And again, using the same motion as we did for A and B, the vote total would be the same. Item D is on page 15, and this is dealing with conflicts of interest.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members, this trailer bill language is really making certain that the standards at the regional center related to conflict of interest are comparable to the standards that you and I face and the reporting that we're required to do currently. The regulations governing conflict of interest were last amended in 1993, and as we've learned both through our reviews and the audits and from the Bureau of State Audits report, there have been a number of instances where decisions have been made by people at regional centers who have a conflict. In the instances in the BSA report, an employee set the rate for their sister, a employee set the rate for an organization he was about to retire and run. So clearly what we're trying to do here, we think the regional center overall, just like all of us, that there's, everybody is ethical and above board, but I think we need to all be very, very clear on our expectations. This would make that clear. It would make each regional center have very clear conflict of interest policies. It would also require them to submit them, both all board members, executive staff, to the department so that we could review reports every year to determine that they don't have a conflict. And hopefully by doing this, it'll eliminate a significant concern that was raised in the audit.
Great. Perfect direction. We want to go there. Love the $11 million. My memory as chair of public safety for so many years reminds me that to require the statement to be signed under penalty of perjury creates a new felony, which is problematic for our public safety committee. I know, having worked on a bill with Senator Emerson, that we were able to work out some language that the public safety consultants were able to put forward for us that we can get to the same goal without creating the felony. So as we develop the placeholder trailer bill language, we'll check with them to make sure that we can do that.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Understand, we did take what's in current law for state employees, but we do understand the issue and would be happy to work with your consultant and the public safety staff on identifying the best way to move forward.
Great. So again, we'll use the same motion and same vote count on item D. Item E is page 16, accountability and transparency.
This, Mr. Chairman and members, this trailer bill language has a number of different items in it. The first has to do with the requirement that the board of directors of the regional centers review any contract. We had recommended at $350,000 or above. In subcommittee, there was discussion about lowering that to $250,000. So I think that was an issue that was recommended by Senator Alquist. We also, in the language, require the boards to make sure they're complying with the statute regarding what they're supposed to be doing. One of the things that I think is really important here is the boards of the regional centers are largely made up by consumers and family members of consumers. And these people are working very, very hard to make certain that the services are provided in the community, but they're also running very, very large organizations. And the one thing that I've seen since I've been here is often that the board doesn't understand their responsibility, and I think it's very important that they do understand and that they're very clear when they take office. And so one of the items deals with that. In addition, it requires extensive posting and publication of materials. One of the issues that was discussed in the audit and at the hearing that Senator Liu had was the issue of access to information, in particular regarding vendor rates when they were negotiated. So the trailer bill language would require the posting at the regional centers and also some posting at the department level to keep links. In addition, federal government has come out to look at the state of California's implementation of Medicaid, which they do normally, periodically. One of the issues that they identified is the service providers in our system are not enrolled Medi-Cal providers, and so they've not gone through that requirement to disclose fraudulent activity or convictions that is required for anybody getting Medi-Cal. The federal government is saying we need to apply that to our providers as well. This would do that as well. The other thing is that currently today, if Department of Health Services or Department of Social Services, for example, suspends a provider in their program, that provider may be serving our people as well, and we don't necessarily have that information. This would require that coordination. So, for example, if health determines that somebody's got some funny billing going on, they suspend them. We need to be suspending them as well and not paying them. So this package in total would save $27.1 million general fund.
Very good. And much of this language comes from the auditor's report.
Yes.
Correct? Yeah.
Yes. The bulk of it is related to the fraudulent requirements.
Great. Any questions? Otherwise, we'll use the same motion and the same vote count on item E. And then the next item on page 17 is yet additional savings that we have to thank our hardworking staff in identifying. So this is above and beyond the governor's budget. Can you walk us through that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members, on page 17, the first item has to do with funding that was provided as part of the closure of Agnew's Developmental Center. There are a couple of things that are phasing out that are no longer needed. The $1.5 million is general fund savings that we do anticipate. The second item includes actually two components. We've been working with your consultant to identify additional abilities to collect additional federal funds. We do believe that we will be able to bill an additional $8 million to the federal government as outlined in the second item here. The third item is something that when we did our last budget reductions of $334 million, one of the components was to get a large number of facilities that are community care facilities where we can't get federal Medicaid dollars to have them become eligible for federal Medicaid funding. The majority of them, that has happened. By law, they have until next year to either become eligible or be in the process of becoming eligible. There's about 20 or so that haven't yet gotten there. Some are in the process, some are not. This here, the savings that your consultant is recommending is associated with having more of them either become eligible or in some downsize or in some other fashion being able to collect federal funds.
Thank you. And thank you working with our staff to identify this $11.2 billion. So we have a motion by Senator Saulnier to approve the reduction of that amount, and that will be without objection. Page 18 is a conforming action. This is savings due to the rejection of the medical caps that we did not take yesterday. Any other addition you have to that?
No, Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding that it'll be conforming when each year, because of the impact of reductions in other generic programs, there's an overlap into our program, and there was anticipated in the governor's budget some funding in our area for those cuts if they had transpired. You didn't adopt them, so it would be less in our area.
Okay, Senator Huff.
Yes, and if this is conforming to action yesterday and we voted for the larger cuts, we have to vote no on this as part of that conforming part.
Makes sense. Senator DeSaulnier?
Sorry.
We have a comment from Finance?
Han Wang, Department of Finance, and we just like to note that the latest figure from the Department of Healthcare Services indicates a $9 million reduction based on the Senate decision yesterday.
So you think the savings here is $9 million as opposed to 15?
Okay. Sorry, we'll discuss this further.
Comment. Okay, we're going to keep with the $15 million.
That's what we're conforming to.
And the motion is to accept the additional reduction with Democrats voting aye and Republicans voting no. Page 19 moves into the regional centers.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members, on page 19 is the recommendation to continue for one additional year the 4.25% regional center operations and provider payment reduction. As I mentioned earlier, last year we went through very significant reductions. Many of you were part of our process, $334 million in general fund reductions, and on top of that there was a provider payment reduction of 4.25. That provider payment reduction scheduled to sunset in June of this year. The recommendation is to continue it one more year for a savings of $91.5 million.
Thank you. Colleagues, as difficult as this is to continue for one more year, I do want to point out that there are services, and Director Delgadillo, you confirm this for me, that there are services that would be exempt from this reduction if there is any threat to the health and safety of the consumer? Okay.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Move the approval.
So we have a motion to approve the recommendation of this continuation of the 4.25% reduction, and that is without objection. Page 20 is budget bill language for prevention programs.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members, as part of the $334 million reduction that occurred last year, there was a change in our Early Start program that identified a number of consumers who did not have developmental delays or disabilities at the level to meet the program at the time. These individuals, the concern was that these individuals would still need some casework services and coordination, so a prevention program was created. At the time, we anticipated about 17,800 children who were in the Early Start program would instead be in the prevention program. That number did not materialize. When the regional center went back and reviewed them, they actually found their level of delay met the Early Start criteria, so they stayed in Early Start. We did in the current last year, and then we're recommending in the current year and budget year to reduce the amount of the amount we were putting into the prevention program, and to take that money and put it into cover services in the regional center purchase a service item, since these children for the most part remained in the Early Start program. So all this language does is allow us to move the money from the prevention program into the services.
I remember last year in the subcommittee we had long conversations about this, and this is really about recognizing that there are some children who don't need all the full services of the Early Start program, but they definitely do need some attention. That's what these funds would be used for. It gives your department some flexibility to be able to deal with all of the children in the most cost-effective way.
Thank you.
Very good.
Move approval.
All right, we have a motion for approval. Senator Huff.
Yeah, in the category of transparency and accountability, we have some concerns with this because it sets up a mechanism to transfer from one to the other when there doesn't seem to be any caseload data indicating growth in either prevention or Early Start program. So we would respectfully oppose this.
Okay, so noted. Any comment to that?
I do, Senator Huff, appreciate the concern. You know, when we started, we anticipated there'd be 17,800 babies. That's not materialized. We do believe that there'll be over 10,000 babies in the current year. When they went back and looked, the regional centers found the babies had higher degree of need than originally anticipated. What we are asking to do is to put the money into the purchase of service budget, which is the budget we'll be talking about in a minute, which is recommended for a significant reduction. To the degree it's not needed in prevention, we're actually trying not to put too much in prevention, because we believe at the beginning, based on the number we had and the amount that we put in there, which was $36 million, we've been monitoring it every month and not putting the money out to the regional centers because the caseload hadn't materialized. So this would only allow us to not put it out in prevention and put it over into services.
Don't you already have the mechanism to transfer from one to the other with some steps you have to jump through notifying the legislature?
We can go through that process if this language isn't approved. This just gets the money into purchase of services quicker so we don't run into a deficit.
Well,
that was
again,
the recommendation.
For transparency and accountability, we would prefer that it stick to the existing method, so we would oppose this recommendation.
So noted. I can say that if we were talking about any number of other departments and any number of other directors, I may have more concern, but in this situation I do not. So we have a motion, and Democrats voting aye, Republicans voting no. Page 21, new cost containment and statewide purchase of services standards.
Mr. Chairman and members, we all have a monumental task in front of us, and for the department, again, the January budget assumed $750 million in general fund savings. We've talked about a number of reductions to achieve that savings so far, but that still leaves a very substantial amount of money. When we looked at preparing the budget originally, we looked back at last year. Last year, what we did when we had a cut of $334 million is, as opposed to the department assuming we knew best what to do, we put together together a work group that involved legislative staff and it involved all of our community, representatives of all of our community. They came in and advised us. We had public hearings. We received input from anybody that wanted to give us ideas, and then this work group talked about them. And then the department put forward proposals based on the input that we had received. As we look at a reduction again of this size, I really struggle. There's no silver bullet. There's no simple answer. You know, the department's very committed to maintaining the entitlement to services. We're very committed to not creating waiting lists. These people need these services. And to achieve this amount of savings, recognizing the budget is just awful for everybody, we again wanted to seek input from our community. We have put up a survey. We've said at the very beginning of the survey, give us your ideas any way you want to, but here's a survey if you would like to do it in that fashion. We did receive about 9,000 entries into the survey of people that had looked at it. It was split pretty evenly between providers and consumers and family members. We also were planning to put together work groups again, and this time we were going to do 8 work groups, a work group in each of the major budget areas so that we could get more providers and more family members in the room on that budget area. So people using that service would be at the table to advise us and then do public hearings and come back to the legislature. So that's what's before you is trailer bill language directing us to do that. I know that there are significant concerns. We also have significant concerns. It's a monumental task, but feel that it's our responsibility to do it as openly and as publicly as we can to arrive at recommendations to the legislature.
Thank you. I know very difficult consideration in this issue. Also keeping in mind that just a couple years ago we cut $334 million from your department, which impacted mostly the community-based services. I also need to voice that, again, you're working under extraordinary pressures and time frames, though many of my constituents had concerns with the questionnaire and the survey and how it was all put together. So I think we're looking for a way to modify the depth of this particular cut. Senator Emerson.
I'm disappointed again to see that the administration has chosen to focus the cost containment on community services rather than the bureaucracy in the department developmental centers. And I would like to make a suggestion that I think there's some reduction of about $34 million that we could do, and that's $14 million in the prevention program, freeze other regional center operation costs, which would save $11 million, and regional center operations of the Agnew staffing of $5 million. I just don't think any additional monies for Agnew are necessary. And the developmental center staffing of $4 million, I just think no additional funding at that. That would reduce 27 positions at Agnew, so of about $4 million. So,
if I may, Mr. Chairman, and I really apologize. The budget is quite confusing as it relates to Agnew's, but basically, the budget, when you get all the pieces pulled together, closes Agnew's June 30th of this year. So we're taking all of the funding, but where it comes is that in the item itself, it doesn't look like it, but we have, what are they called? Workforce cap. That was an administrative decision for the workforce cap. It takes out all the rest of the expenditures. So it basically takes out all of the Agnew's expenditures effective June 30th of this year. But I apologize because it's very confusing.
Senator DeSaulnier.
Well, I appreciate, Terry, all your hard work on this and also our committee consultant. And while I don't disagree with Senator Emerson, we're going to keep working with you. I know Senator Liu will. So I would make a motion to reject the administration's dollar amount and instead reduce by only $150 million and to adopt placeholder trailer language, and we'll continue to work with you on that.
All right. Senator Huff.
Yes, thank you. We can't support the motion as it is. Senator Emerson has offered some ideas on how to get closer to the target. You're not taking those. Additionally, we are prepared to take the full cuts, even though that's difficult, because none of this is easy. But once again, we see you guys in conflict with your own governor's recommendation. So we will just Again, we're willing to do the whole thing. We will go aye on this, but we think there's additional savings to be made.
I appreciate the difference of opinion here. Again, the direction that Senator DeSaulnier's motion is going is recognizing the severity of the cuts to the regional centers in recent years, that it could be overly burdensome to the community delivery of services if we were to take that entire cut. And again, we will be using other savings found in other places so that we, again, hit the governor's target, but not by accepting this total savings. So the motion will pass with Democrats voting aye and Republicans voting no.
Actually, we're okay with it. We just think.
Oh, okay. Very good. Then it is without objection.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, can I clarify? It's 150 versus what, 750, or off of just this
Off the
remaining amount?
423.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify.
23.8, yeah. And page 23, expansion of the psychiatric program. Oh, we're thanking you. We're moving on to the Department of Mental Health. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good work.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Okay, I know the LAO has some concern with the proposal in front of us on page 23. Would you like to begin the conversation?
Sean Martin with the Legislative Analyst's Office. We recommend a reduction of $1.8 million general fund to the administration's request to expand the psychiatric program at Vacaville. Based on our review of the administration's proposal, it does not adequately reflect the phase-in of the new positions throughout the budget year.
Very good. So, colleagues, the administration is proposing an increase of $7.5 million to support 80 new positions, and this is as a result of the Coleman Court decision. The LAO is suggesting that rather than $7.5 million, we increase it by only $5.7 million, but we'll let the administration be able to defend its position. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Cindy Radavsky for the Department of Mental Health. Just a few points that I'd like to make on the Coleman Court order. The department has been challenged with activation, most recently to clear the high custody wait list, which is averaging about 300-plus patients trying to get into these very limited beds. The activation of these 64 beds has been accelerated by 1 year. The court ordered an acceleration, so we submitted a phase-in plan, and instead of opening in October of 2012, we are required to start admitting patients in September of 2011. Historically, we have a 6 to 18 months of preparation, of training staff, trying to get licensed, trying to get all of our organizational structures in place. And as you can see, we are pretty well jammed up, losing 1 year of activation. In addition, we recently received a court order from the Coleman Court to admit where we traditionally admit 5 a week, to admit 10 a week. So the court is really pressuring on accelerated activation, accelerated number of patients, and if we're having difficulty filling these beds, our concern is the court's talking about ordering these patients into state hospital beds. So we provided an activation plan, and some of these staff will come in after the patients come in, sir.
Okay. Thank you for your defense, and we're very confident that you're going to be able to do this even without the $1.8 million. Senator DeSaulnier?
Move the staff's recommendation.
So we're going to go with the LAO recommendation, and I believe that's without objection. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Department of Mental Health. We will move on to public safety on page 24. Starting with the judicial branch. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. Ron Overholt, Chief Deputy Director of the Judicial Council. I'm here with Stephen Nash, who's our Director of Finance. There are two issues related to the judicial branch. The first is a $200 million unallocated reduction across all areas of the judicial branch. We are working with all of the court stakeholder groups to identify solutions that would be able to absorb that $200 million with a primary objective of ensuring that the courts are able to remain open and operating on a full-time basis. So we have a variety of approaches to that would ensure that the courts could remain open.
Very good. And some of the, well, first of all, working with you and with the new Chief Justice, appreciate your graciousness in recognizing our job here and the challenge of being able to make this cut in a, dare I say, judicious fashion, though leaving it as unallocated, but also with some concern for access to justice if this were to too greatly impact the trial court operations. So the suggestion here is that the allocation be proportionate to the state level and the trial court level, that we permit redirection from statewide fund balances to offset some of the cuts to the trial courts, and then also adopt some language which would state that the Judicial Council can direct trial courts to use up to $95 million of local reserves to the extent necessary to ensure that the courts do remain open.
We appreciate that approach, Mr. Chairman.
Very good.
Senator
Hancock?
I would move the unallocated reduction and the direction to the court.
Thank you. All right, so that'll be the motion, and that will be without objection. Page 25 is with regard to court case management. No one's favorite subject. You've really inherited a mess here.
Understood. This item relates to an audit performed by the Bureau of State Audits.
A devastating audit.
It was critical of the process, and we acknowledge that there are a number of issues that need to be addressed in that process. This recommendation relates to the retention of an independent consultant to be able to review the final product that is built and to ensure that it's of a quality product before it's implemented in the 3 early adopter courts that will be the first 3 to have the system. We agree with that recommendation and will work swiftly to implement it.
Great. And so the budget bill language would reflect that. Yes, Senator Wolk.
I have a question. I'm on JLAC and attended the hearing. The recommendation about this independent review is going to happen fairly quickly, I believe, isn't it?
Yes, we will be working immediately with the state information officer to identify an appropriate consultant to be able to do that work.
Right, and the idea was that there would be a response to this by May. Wasn't there there was a really short timeline attached to this. So my question is whether, given the cost of the system and the severity of the audit, the seriousness of the audit, that is there provision for taking into account, again, in this budget year, prior to June?
A representative from the auditor is here. Would you like to hear from them?
Yes, I'd like to.
Good morning.
Good morning, members. Donna Neville, Associate Chief Counsel for the State Auditor. And as Senator Wolkes pointed out, yes, there is a sense of urgency to doing this quality assessment. It has to do with the fact that the State Auditor believes it's really important to do this as quickly as possible in order to maximize the leverage that the AOC and Judicial Council have with their vendor, so that if any errors in the CCMS system are detected during this testing, that they can be covered under the warranty period under the contract. So there is definitely a desire to do this assessment before the AOC and Judicial Council actually sign off on the product and accept it formally from the vendor.
And that could have serious budget implications, which will occur before June, or not?
Well, I hope this responds to your question, Senator Wolk. It was our understanding that the Judicial Council and AOC have sufficient funding set aside right now to deploy the California case management system to the 3 early adopter courts, and we believe that they could absorb the cost of this testing from those resources, and that it wouldn't require an additional appropriation of general funds to do it.
So, Senator Wolk, just to reiterate, the proposed budget bill language would specifically state that this would be funded using existing project funds.
Right.
Senator Hancock?
Yeah, I would move the recommendation and also point out that the independent consultant's report will be provided to the legislature as well.
Absolutely. Good additional point. So without objection, that's the motion as accepted. Thank you. Page 26 deals with the Inspector General. We're still talking about 2,000 employees. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Bruce Monfrost. I'm the Acting Inspector General. I have been so since January of this year. I would like to begin by thanking the committee for the opportunity to present information regarding the peace officer status of OIG employees. To begin with, we do not dispute that the OIG can effectively and efficiently perform its various missions if peace officer status is removed from the attorneys and auditors who currently perform those duties for our office.
They will be able to.
Yes, and doing so will result in a 75% reduction in the number of peace officers assigned to the Office of the Inspector General. Our fundamental problem is that the OIG also requires an effective investigative arm as well. And historically, unfortunately historically, our auditors and investigators have been artificially shoehorned into a singular classification. Despite the fact that auditors and investigators have very different skill sets, educations, backgrounds. This has been a problem for the office since 1999 when that classification was initially created. As I said, we believe it absolutely crucial that we maintain a fully effective investigative component in order to be able to perform all of our missions. We believe we can do this with a staff of approximately 25 investigators. In order to accomplish this, what we will need to do is split the existing Deputy Inspector General classification into an auditor component and an investigator component. We believe we can readily do that. In fact, we have the proposal essentially drafted to accomplish that. And in fact, if we are able to do that, that will bring the OIG into line with the vast majority of existing state and federal offices of Inspector General, which traditionally have an auditor component, a law enforcement investigative component, and an attorney component. Now, most importantly, for purposes of this budget, this committee's discussions, we believe that if we are afforded the opportunity to make this restructure occur, and if we can thereafter reassign the law enforcement component of our requirements to this smaller cadre of investigators, we will actually be able to achieve a total savings of $3.4 million as opposed to $2.2 million that's been projected to date. So we could actually give up an additional $1.2 million if we're able to accomplish this restructuring.
And what would the savings grow to if there is no peace officer status?
If there is no peace officer status, I believe we are looking at an additional $300,000.
So we would be up to $3.7 million.
We would be up to 3.7, but again, Senator, that would absolutely undermine and eviscerate the office's ability to conduct investigations.
Okay. I appreciate the argument you're making, and I'm going to suggest that you'll have a chance in the spring to come back to us and make that argument again after the May revise. I just want to point out that out of the Attorney General's 1,200 attorneys and auditors, only 5 have this peace officer status, and that the Los Angeles County's Office of Independent Review, which is the agency upon which your office has been modeled, does not utilize any sworn peace officers.
And all due respect, Senator, with respect to OIR, that is because they perform a very different function. The function OIR performs is very analogous to the function that our Bureau of Independent Review, which we call the attorneys, perform. And I'm talking about what we're recommending is, yes, remove peace officer status from all of those folks. None of them would retain. But OIR does not conduct independent investigations of its own, whereas as an Inspector General's office, we are necessarily required to do that. That is a fundamental matter that OIGs have to be able to do. If we lose all law enforcement capacity, that will make us very different from any other OIG that I am aware of, and will fundamentally alter our ability to conduct effective investigations.
Since the legislature gave you this authority so many years ago, how many arrests have been made?
I cannot say that. I cannot tell you right now.
I think the Office of Oversight and Outcomes said there were none.
Well, I believe there were, Senator, I don't believe there are no arrests that were made. However, there's also a matter of when the OIG conducts investigations, it also does it in conjunction with outside law enforcement, and will oftentimes allow outside law enforcement to actually arrest individuals and thereafter prosecute those individuals.
And in the past 5 years, how often has an OIG peace officer fired a gun?
In the line of duty, I can't recall ever, Your Honor, Senator. Sorry, I'm reverting back to my former status.
I'm not going to correct you.
I appreciate that. But, you know, Senator, I believe you can ask that exact same question of any Office of Internal Affairs unit. How many times have they fired their weapons? I would be willing to bet 0 to very, very seldom.
Okay. I'm just looking at some of the facts from the Senate Office of Oversight and Outcomes report. And it states that in the past 5 years, there was not a single OIG peace officer who had fired a gun on duty except at a firing range. And in that case, there was an accidental shooting where he shot himself.
But Senator, I would posit to you, Senator, that is whether or not someone has drawn a weapon and fired at anybody is a very, very poor indicator of whether law enforcement capabilities are needed to perform an effective investigation.
All right. Senator Huff.
Thank you, Your Honor.
That wasn't genuine.
No. Question. Do inspectors general in other states have law enforcement investigative capacity?
Absolutely. That is the fundamental structure for offices of the Inspector General.
What type of investigations would require, describe where this helps you?
It runs the gamut of investigations. We investigate, you know, a myriad of administrative type investigations. We investigate individuals who are charged with committing physical assaults or sexual assaults on staff or inmates. We investigate individuals who are accused of, who are suspected of bringing weapons, narcotics, other contraband into an institution. We investigate individuals who are accused of committing various felonious acts such as financial misconduct, embezzlement. It's the entire gamut of investigations that we will conduct.
But you feel some of these would compromise your people if they did not have peace officer status?
Oh, absolutely. Some of these investigations require us to conduct surveillance, require us to do effect search and seizures. You cannot reasonably ask somebody to put themselves in that position if they do not have law enforcement status. All we're talking about here today is bringing the OIG into line with how OIGs throughout the nation traditionally operate. All I'm saying is I'm not going to dispute that the pendulum swung too far as to who was given peace officer status. All I'm saying is I think it would be a very, very large mistake to swing the pendulum too far back the other way.
And Would you also argue for their enhanced pension benefits?
For the 25 individuals who are assigned to law enforcement, absolutely. They would be fully trained peace officers, yes.
Still got a couple more questions. So the Senate Office of Oversight and Outcomes November report was critical of the law enforcement training provided by the OIG. Would you describe what kind of background and training OIG investigators have?
Our investigative arm, which the Office of Oversight and Outcomes really did not look at, these are fully trained law enforcement personnel. They have, with the exception of just 3 individuals, have attended and passed post or C-post certified academies. They have extensive law enforcement backgrounds. These are fully trained peace officers.
Okay, thank you. It's my understanding this was not heard in subcommittee. It seems more like a policy. It also seems like something that could wait until spring, because in the meantime, it doesn't help us now if we're just putting off his appeal until springtime. I was wondering if the administration has any comment. Do we know where does the governor support this?
Thank you, Senator. Members of the committee, the administration has not taken a position on this issue to date. In the event that the committee does take an action in this area, we would appreciate a chance to work on the details of implementation so that we can make sure that it's done in a way that allows the department to continue to carry out its mission effectively.
Thank you. In that we're scoring $2 to $3.4 million, I would suggest this be taken up in policy. I think there's some give and take that needs to be done in understanding the issue more, and we wouldn't be supporting this proposal today. We might abstain, but we won't support it.
Okay. Senator Hancock.
Yeah, and we will be taking it up in policy committee as well. I would move that we adopt trailer bill language to change current laws that make OIG attorneys and auditors sworn peace officers and reduce the budget by $2 million to reflect those changes. Oh, we could take the higher number, actually, that was suggested, 3.7 million.
I believe that was 3.4.
That's actually what I had too, so, but 3.4.
No, 3.4 keeps the benefit for their investigators, which
Oh,
3.7.
all right, no, we are going to do the whole savings, so that would be $3.7 million in savings, and what this means is the car, the gun, the 3% at 50 would not be there.
Senator Lamalfa and then Senator Wright.
Thank you. I think I'm hearing 2 different numbers on this. It'd be 3.4 million savings if adopting the proposal to bring it down to 25 sworn, and 3.7 million in savings if none are sworn. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Okay, so Senator Hancock, I don't know which way you wanted to go on that. If you wanted to bring it down to the 25 and 3.4 or 3.7 for completely changing the status, is it?
I was going to do the 3.7.
Okay, all right, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, thank you. And so then that goes against your desires.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, yes. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Senator Lamalfa, however, if in fact you would be more comfortable and we could work together on this, because there will be some policy bill as well, I would accept the 3.4 and make that as the motion, and we can achieve those savings, and then we can move ahead and look at the whole policy. One of my colleagues over here said, why do we need an OIG office at all? I mean, we'll look at the whole thing in policy committee, because we know we're turning people out on the street in some of the actions we took on human services, so we're trying to be careful. But I would take your suggestion for a savings of 3.4 million.
I'd totally go along with that, and be able to revisit this later and see what the other 300,000 effect would be. So I think we grab the 3.4 down and move. So I appreciate that.
Okay. Senator Wright and then Senator Huff.
Okay. Not having been on the policy committee, it's not clear to me why this isn't done, say, in the Attorney General's office. As I was listening to you describe what you do, why is this office separate from a regular law enforcement office? that we already have?
No, the office is structured very much like offices of the Inspector General throughout various states and throughout the federal government. They're, generally speaking, they're either within the federal government, they're cited as independent entities within a particular department, or they are cited as very separate organizations that oversee a particular operation or operations of state governments. So they're traditionally not within departments of justice or within the Attorney General's offices.
And I apologize, I don't know, so I'm not. But so this is your job would be to investigate state agencies who might be potentially even the Attorney General's office.
No, strictly the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation.
Okay, so it's only
the Department of Corrections.
That department. Okay.
Yes.
So if we took the peace officer status away from the 75 or 80 guys that's on the table,
25 is what we're...
105 sworn officers now.
So, but I thought we're going to 25. Is that?
That's what our proposed would be 25.
Maybe I'm not good at math, but that's where I figured that's 75 or 80, isn't it?
Well, you
went from
remove
105 to 25.
Correct.
That's 80, isn't it?
You would remove it from 80 persons who currently possess it. That's correct.
Okay. Would they then transfer to another department?
No.
Would they just lose benefits? What would
they would lose their law enforcement status. They would continue to perform their existing duties.
Okay, so they would. So the benefits and the status that go with what they have would then be reduced. So in theory, these guys would then start looking for other jobs if they wanted to remain as law enforcement personnel.
Yes, that is possible. That's a definite possibility, yes.
And the cars, we would simply sell them, or is that what would happen?
Well, for one bureau, for the auditors, we've already brought back their take-home vehicles, converted them to a pool status, and put 13 vehicles back into the state vehicle fleet, sold them back to DGS.
Okay.
We've already done that. Currently, we are, pursuant to the governor's executive order, we are looking at the status of all remaining take-home vehicle permits, and if DGS determines they are either not essential or not cost-effective, then we will obviously comply with whatever directives come down from the executive office regarding the status of those vehicles.
So as you were serving warrants and other kinds of things, is there something that would preclude you, say, from the investigative side, to coordinate with other law enforcement people who could, in fact, so say you were going to serve a warrant on someone, and that person lived in Folsom, why wouldn't you coordinate with the Folsom Sheriff's Department to do that portion of the investigation that would require artillery, and then you could handle, because I'm going to guess you're going to have to take them to, if you arrested them, you'd have to take them to a jail someplace anyway. So in all likelihood, the reason you don't have many arrests is that you don't have a booking facility and the other things to do that part of it.
That's correct. We don't have an OIG jail. But theoretically, what you're talking about, Senator, it could be done, but then you are now reliant upon the local entities having an interest in what we are looking at and actually being willing to assign resources to assist us in accomplishing that particular mission. And that will not necessarily always be the case. In addition, when you're talking about a skilled law enforcement individual who can effectively perform these investigations, who has the necessary background and experience, it's very difficult to find someone who will want to do that for you if they do not have law enforcement status.
But for example, the Highway Patrol, when they make a traffic stop and they determine that someone was drunk, they don't have jails. So the Highway Patrol will coordinate, say, with the L.A. County Sheriff. So
no, the Highway Patrol will transport the individual to the county jail.
That's what I'm saying.
Right, but they will transport them to the county jail.
Exactly.
That's correct.
And so by definition, then the county or the city, wherever the jurisdiction was, cooperates with the Highway Patrol because the Highway Patrol doesn't perform the function of putting the person in jail. So, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
We have a few more folks who want to speak.
I'm sorry.
We're about halfway through our agenda. We're trying to get done by 12:30. So, colleagues, just so you know, we do have a compromise before us so that Republicans and Democrats can agree on this. The motion was to allow for this status for just the 25 investigators, to have the savings at $3.4 million, which is actually $1.4 million than we actually thought it would be, and that's what's before us. Did Senator Lowenthal? Senator Saulnier? Senator Huff?
You just clarified the question.
All right. So that's the motion before us. Without objection, we will take the $3.4 million savings.
Very well said.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Senator Wright. Thank you, colleagues. Moving to page 27, California Gambling Control Commission, Special Distribution Fund Grants. Colleagues, this is a vote-only item. The recommendation is to approve the budget bill language providing a one-time extension of special distribution fund reporting requirements.
I would move the recommendation.
That's the motion, and that is without objection. Page 28 is the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitations, dealing with our somewhat significant structural shortfall.
Master of understatement.
You can sit there.
Welcome.
The department requested $395 million to address the shortfall that has continuously existed within the department's budget over the past several years, mostly related to areas that have structural impact, such as underfunding for salaries, medical guarding shortfalls, changes in overtime, compensation related to salary increases that were not funded as overtime, legal costs, and swing space. The total for that was $395. The subcommittee reduced that amount by $83 million in order to fund restoring our rehabilitation programs, which were cut by $150 million related to realignment.
Very good. Senator Hancock?
I move that we reduce the structural shortfall proposal by a total of $150 million and restore the AB 900 general fund amount of $75 million that we previously reverted in committee. This will allow the restoration of program funding and won't conflict with the governor's plan for using those AB 900 funds, and will still provide the department with $245 million as an augmentation to their base to address structural shortfall issues.
Could you restate it? I'm not sure I understood it.
Just a second. So, colleagues, we're going to bifurcate this vote. The first part of Senator Hancock's motion, the restoration of the AB $900, which is $75 million that had previously been reverted, that will be the first motion, and that is without objection. And then there is debate between the Democrats and Republicans here regarding the reduction of the structural shortfall by $150 million. So we'll take that as a separate vote. And since we are taking that as a separate vote, we will, in that vote, add an additional budget bill language. This has to do with the rebuild of the condemned inmate complex at San Quentin. You may remember this is to be built with lease revenue bonds. The project continues to change. The costs go up, the number of beds go down, and as it's currently proposed, the average bed cost is about $500,000 per bed, making it the most expensive correctional bed anywhere in the country. The general fund hit for the debt service, if this were to be built out, would bring the project cost to over $1 billion at a cost of about $30 million per year over 25 years. There had been budget bill language 2 years ago which would require the department to determine that it can legally double sell these condemned inmates. That is a big question mark because it's not done anywhere else in the country, I think, short of Oklahoma, and that if it is not legally determined that these inmates can be double-celled, we will reach capacity again once the project's complete within just 3 years, and we'll be back to where we started with a $1 billion tab before us. So the budget bill language that we inserted a couple years ago would allow this program to go forward only if the department can legally determine the double selling of the condemned inmates, and then also a resolution of the federal court litigation on prison overcrowding currently before the 3-judge panel convened under the Prison Litigation Reform Act. So that would be additional budget bill language that we had put in 2 years ago, and we'll include that in the second motion before us, and I believe that would then be Democrats aye and Republicans no.
That's correct. And if you're interested, we have a way to reduce that population a little bit, reduce prison overcrowding.
All right. Very good.
Mr. Leno.
Yes.
Chris Leaf, Department of Finance. For the record, we don't support that proposal.
So
the additional budget bill language, we would note that there's no appropriation proposed in the budget for this project.
Very good. My understanding is that contracts may be signed within the next couple of weeks, and with the enormous structural shortfall before us, I have real concern that we're going to go down this path of construction for a project that is not cost efficient whatsoever. And there's also the consideration of why California continues to separate out these inmates. Other states don't necessarily do that. They could be integrated. We do have murderers mixed with others in security facilities, high security facilities. There's no reason why these additional populations cannot be mixed. So that's the reason for the budget bill language, but your comment is so noted, and that motion will pass, Democrats voting aye, Republicans no.
The next proposal is related to the pre-activation staffing and activation staffing for the Estrella Correctional Facility, which is refurbishment of the former Paso Robles Youth Correctional Facility. This request proposes $2.7 million general fund and 21.4 positions in 11-12, growing to $41.5 million general fund and 442.6 positions in 2012-13 to activate this facility. This facility will house our specialized general population inmates, enhanced outpatient inmates, and some general population inmates. The specialized general population are medical inmates, and the enhanced outpatient inmates would be in our mental health system.
And this is a part of the Receivers Program, and I know the receiver is here. Did you want to say something?
Yes, Joyce Hayhill from the Federal Receiver's Office is part of our the Receiver's bed activation needs.
It's also part of our Coleman bed activation plan as well to address the needs of the Coleman Court related to mental health.
Very good. Senator Hancock?
I move that we approve as budgeted. I would note for my committee members, since we did deny this originally or cut it in half, that after discussions with the receiver, we are moving forward, that the legislature will get copies of the monthly reports that are due to Judge Carlton, so we can also track this, and also we'll have an opportunity to know more about the staff that is hired, because it is assumed that they will then be there for the long term in this new facility. So approve as budgeted is the motion.
So that is the motion, and it passes without objection.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Corrections. Moving on to higher education, page 30. California State Library, the state support for local libraries. Page 30. Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to the California State Library's budget.
Colleagues, if we could refocus. Thank you.
Thank you. There are three three programs that received zero in the governor's proposed budget for 2011-2012. Those programs include the Public Library Foundation, which provides direct support to public libraries for services in their communities. It is a population-based model that provides funding to local libraries, and libraries have to meet a maintenance of effort in order to receive that funding. The second program is the California Library Services Act, which is the core for providing equal access to information in the state of California. It provides a small amount of reimbursement for public libraries who share their resources across jurisdictions, and it also provides an equity and economy of scale of resources through services of 8 regional libraries that support libraries in those communities. The third program is the English Acquisitions and Literacy Program, and this program provides, again, literacy programs to people who have less than a 6th grade reading level, and it is locally based and in communities, in 105 communities in California. And for every $1 that the state provides, there are 4 local dollars that are leveraged for this program. With the elimination of funding for all of these 3 programs, there is concern that we will not be able to make our future maintenance of effort requirements for Library Service and Technology Act funding, our federal funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Librarian Aldridge. Finance?
Yeah, Lennon Del Castillo with the Department of Finance. No specific comment to add. We just urge your support for the governor's budget proposal.
Okay, thank you. Again, not an easy decision for us to be making, but one we need to take very seriously, and always with the opportunity to review as we move into the spring. But Senator Alquist?
Given the huge deficit, I approve the motion.
All right, so the motion is to support the governor's proposal of savings of $3.4 million, and that would be unanimous with the exception of Senators Wolk, Simitian, and Liu abstaining.
It's $30.39 million.
I was rounding, excuse me. It is $30,390,000.
Can I just make a comment?
Senator Huff.
Yes. As former Budget Chair Ducheney used to say, she would turn to us and say, what, you Republicans aren't willing to support your governor? And so I would just throw that back at you because these cuts are also difficult for us.
I understand.
Through the chairman, Mr. Chairman, on this point, I've heard this comment made a couple of times. I just want to weigh in. First, whether it was Governor Schwarzenegger or whether it's Governor Brown, I've always thought of him as our governor. I feel that way at the national level. Whoever the president's been, I've always thought it was my president and our president, and I feel that way at the state level. And just as a sort of a frame of reference, I wanted to share that. Second, but I also think about the governor and the executive branch, for whom I have nothing but the highest regard and respect, as a separate branch of government. And as we say, the governor proposes and the legislature disposes. And the legislature, including members from both parties, have an obligation to review the governor's budget and to change it appropriately based on our best assessment of how to get to the place we all know we have to go. So I am actually quite sympathetic with the comments Senator Huff has made about the fact that ultimately if there's a number out there that we say we're going to get to, we have to get there. I'm also sympathetic about the difficulty of taking a different path when it's not clear what the entire package is. But I just want to say, I think each and every one of us, notwithstanding party affiliation, has not only the right but the obligation to exercise independent judgment, and as much regard as I have for this governor or for the last, that's why we're sitting here in committee, is to exercise that thoughtful, independent judgment.
Thank you, Senator Simitian. We're going to have a brief comment from Senator Huff, then we're going to take our vote. Oh, yes. We already did.
Comments from my colleague noted. It would have been nice to have heard that defense last year and the year before when we were being pilloried on the your governor comment. At that time, it didn't seem so personal, perhaps. Understand from our perspective, Republicans are being asked to basically putting up votes on something. We don't know the end game. We have the governor that has laid out his plan. The Democrat members of the Budget Committee are maneuvering around different obstacles within that, and yet we don't see the end game as noted yesterday, so we're still concerned. And every now and then, as the minority party, we have to raise our little flag and make sure that, we're still here and have our concerns. None of these cuts are easy for any of us.
All right, we're all going to take a deep breath and turn to page 31. Moving on to the University of California. Thank you, Librarian Aldridge. We'll see you in the springtime.
Thank you.
Thank you for bearing with us and working with us.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. Patrick Lenz. I'm Vice President for Budget and Capital Resources for the University of California. As noted in your agenda, the governor is proposing a $500 million reduction to the University of California, and I would agree that after you net out the 8% fee increase approved by the regents, that would come to $377 million. What's not noted in your agenda, though, is that the university will face about $365 million of additional funding challenges as a result of mandatory cost. The most notable one that is not funded in the budget is about $183 million relative to retirement. So I didn't want to have the members walk away, and we've had this discussions before Senator Liu's budget subcommittee, with the impression that all we're going to have to manage is a $377 million reduction. It's actually going to be in the neighborhood of twice that amount of money. With that, the governor has asked us, and I think the regents are just as concerned about trying to manage this reduction without raising fees or without reducing enrollment. And I think that the university has been very mindful, particularly on the enrollment issue, which is on your next page, in trying to get back to a state-funded level of enrollment, but not take significant reductions in enrollment for the university. That having been said, we may be faced with the fact that since we are over-enrolled by about 16,000 students, we would note that we're looking at other opportunities for resources within the university, and we've begun to increase our non-resident enrollment as a result of that. We will continue to be mindful of the priority in serving California residents, but again, we are significantly over-enrolled with our California resident students. As it pertains to our outreach and academic preparation programs, we think that these have been very successful, very high priority programs. But when the options of not being able to generate any additional revenue from fees, or if in fact the priority is to continue to take the students, we are looking at a whole host of programs that don't serve the students in the classroom, don't admit another student, or aren't relevant as it pertains to additional financial aid for students, and evaluating very carefully the priority of our ability to fund those particular programs. This is where the administration has provided, and we would ask your support for maximum flexibility as it pertains to dealing with these programs, keeping you well informed of what our intent is and other resources that may be available for these programs, or how they might be better managed at the campus level than centrally. But here again, we're asking for flexibility in that regard. And then finally, on the capital projects, I want to express my appreciation to the consultants in recognizing that we do have 4 projects here that are equipment projects, most notably for classrooms that we hope will open in the fall. We would normally be satisfied with waiting for the normal budget process, but that process may extend to a period of time past when campuses have an ability or the authority to actually order the equipment funding to be able to serve the students in the fall. So we appreciate that being on your agenda. So, Mr. Chairman, that's my brief comments, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lenz, for the overview and summary. Senator Blue, you heard these in subcommittee.
Yes, we did, and I would move the staff's recommendation to approve the unallocated reductions. Also, that the University of California report back to the legislature by March 1st of 2012 on which programs that you are going to be reducing, or what programs and what cost savings measures were taken.
So let's take these page by page. So that's 31.
That's 31.
The budget bill language proposed on 31. And that will, finance.
Thank you. Sarah Swan, Department of Finance. I would just like to interject briefly that we have shared proposed trailer bill language with the staff and also with the segments that would not only maintain the stakeholder process that's currently underway, to look at options for implementing the reduction in a way that achieves the objectives that Mr. Lenz referred to. But at the same time, it would provide some flexibility to the segments to minimize those impacts on fee and enrollments. The language actually calls specifically for a draft plan to be provided to the governor, the legislature, and the stakeholders, and for review and comment, and then they would have to provide a revised plan prior to the adoption of a final plan by the boards, the respective governing boards. And we're also proposing, the reason we're proposing this trailer bill language is we want to allow sufficient time for the draft plan to be issued, as well as the revised plan prior to the beginning of the fiscal year. As we understand, or as our understanding, that at this point in time, that the governor anticipates only signing necessary trailer bills.
Thank you very much. We will, of course, be working with you as that language is drafted.
Thank you.
Motion before us is to approve this unallocated cut. And Mr. Lenz, I think you do know, should know, that there's not one of us here who doesn't understand and recognize that our disinvestment in our higher education system does not bode well for the state's future. And so we're all doing what we can to make sure that we reverse course sometime soon, because there'll be a point of no return and concerns.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman, and look forward to working with the legislature on doing just that.
All right, very good. So page 31, without objection. Without objection, everybody. Page 32, you've already walked us through. Senator Liu.
I just, again, move staff's recommendation to approve the budget bill language expressing legislative intent to minimize enrollment impacts for the budget reductions.
Great. That is the motion, and again, without objection, unanimous vote. Page 33.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I might, on page 32, again, as part of the language that's been recommended by the Department of Finance, they have identified an enrollment target here that we have serious concerns about. I would respectfully request that you amend page 32 for purposes of...
You've seen the budget bill language. It reads that it is the intent of the legislature to minimize enrollment impact from the funding reduction in schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate that.
And Mr. Chairman, if I just might add just briefly. So yes, our trailer bill language does have enrollment targets for each of the segments, and it maintains the current enrollment target for UC, as they've indicated that they will not have any difficulty meeting the target in the budget year. Also, we'd just like to point out that this would be a target for the budget year only.
Yeah, as I said earlier, we'll continue to work with you on your trailer bill language, but it's budget bill language that's before us today, and that passes unanimously.
Page 33.
Yes.
I move to adopt staff recommendation to approve budget bill language that states that an aggregate reduction to academic preparation and outreach programs cannot be proportionally greater than the overall general fund reduction. And I understand that there is budget bill language from the
Very good. So the motion is to approve the budget bill language regarding the aggregate reduction to academic preparation and outreach programs.
And again, Mr. Chairman, my only comment here is that it is, I think, the desire certainly of the administration. I would speculate the legislature, and I think the regents, to try to get through a very difficult 11-12 fiscal year by not raising additional fees on students and not reducing enrollment. When you take those two things off the table, this is one of the areas that I had indicated we need maximum flexibility. If you limit it to just the % of general fund reduction, we may be challenged in achieving that, given when you look at the general fund reduction and our mandatory cost, it's more like 25% versus the 16% that's just associated with the general fund reduction.
So noted. This passes. Finance.
Thank you. And we would concur with the concerns expressed by the university. And this is actually an option that has come up in the stakeholder meetings.
Right. And our concern is the risk of the elimination of the outreach programs entirely. So this will pass with Democrats voting aye and Republicans voting no. Page 34, Senator Liu.
And again, the staff move approval of the staff recommendation of all of the approved equipment phase only projects that are identified on page 34.
Thank you, and we appreciate Mr. Lenz's complimentary language to our staff on this item, and this passes unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Page 35.
The recommendation of staff is to reject all lease revenue-funded projects without prejudice at the present time.
So again, this will allow us to reconsider, given the growing debt service come springtime.
We understand, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again.
And that passes unanimously.
Page 36, I move to approve the staff recommendation to approve the unallocated reduction of $1.5 million and at Hastings College of Law, and to create a new schedule for student financial aid with Hastings budget and move all general fund to that new schedule.
Very good. I know we have a representative from Hastings here. I would be proud of Hastings College of Law even if it weren't in my district. This College of Law, of course, was established prior to the establishment of the University of California, so it's a standalone institution that is now funded with only 12% of state support. It is otherwise 88% privately funded. We have continued to reduce its budget. It continues to rank among the most successful and well-regarded colleges of law in the country. So, Mr. Seward, we're pleased to welcome you.
Well, thank you very much. I won't take much of your time, but I would like to express the college's recognition of the financial times we live in. It is very distressing looking at the trend lines in public education. Higher education is our particular area of emphasis and concern. And I would hope that the rest of the higher education segments aren't following in Hastings' lead in sort of seeing continued erosions in state support and a greater emphasis on self-reliance and self-sufficiency. But we do appreciate the committee's inclusion of the language scheduling the state appropriation for student support. We see that as core to our public mission and wish to extend our thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And again, so committee members understand the money that Hastings will be receiving from us, the $6.9 million down from the $8.4 will be used specifically for student financial aid.
Correct.
And Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I may. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, yes. Finance.
Thank you. Just real briefly, so we would have concerns with any language that would redesignate the use of the general fund or the purpose of the general fund for financial aid. That's intended for operating costs. And in essence, by taking this action, it would force the use of fee revenue for operating costs, which would include administration, for instance.
Thank you, Ms. Swan. Mr. Seward, do you want to respond?
Well, the fact of the matter is 88% of our total operations are funded by student fee revenue. We are a standalone law school. We have all of the elements of an institution with security forces, utility bills, library books, retirement costs, salary and benefits, faculty. And so the distinction drawn by the Department of Finance is really, arbitrary because, again, 88% of every dollar we spend today is funded from fees. So a dollar is fungible. A general fund dollar is just as fungible as a student fee dollar. But scheduling the remaining state support for purposes of financial aid, we believe, reflects on the purpose and rationale and reason for that subsidy to begin with. That we are a public institution committed to public access. 60% of our students are female, 44% people of color. We have historically been a social gateway for upward social economic mobility. And so I think the approach, saying that the general fund really is to provide access and nothing else is appropriate and rational.
Thank you, sir. Senator Huff.
Yes, would the LAO like to comment on this, or would you please?
Thank you, Senator Huff. Steve Boylard with Legislative Analyst. This was discussed in subcommittee, and to respond a little bit to the Mr. Seward, that yes, these dollars are fungible, and I guess it could be considered arbitrary just as easily to arbitrarily decide these dollars are financial aid dollars versus anything else. The fact of the matter is, Hastings, like UC and like CSU, receives funding from tuition and from general fund. Those together serve all of their core functions, including some institutional financial aid as a package. So I'm not sure what benefit would come from decreeing that the state support is just going to financial aid. What you would essentially be saying by this is you're providing no support for general operations at Hastings, that it is purely a non-state supported operation. You are just supporting financial aid for students.
Yeah. And on that, I was just going to be addressing you, but on that point, we would agree with the governor's reductions. We also agree with the LAO's comments, and so we would like to bifurcate the vote. Okay. Then we'll vote supporting the governor's reductions, but no on the language directing the funds.
So we'll take two votes. The first would be on the reduction of the $1.5 million, and that passes unanimously. The second vote is the creation of the schedule, and that will pass. Democrats voting aye, Republicans voting no. Mr. Seward, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And moving on to the California State University. First item is the unallocated reduction of $500 million. Page 37.
Thank you, Senator. My name is Robert Turnage. I'm the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Budget for the CSU system. And like the University of California, we are very much aware of the circumstances the state is in. We understand everybody needs to be part of the solution. But I appreciate the concern that you expressed about the future. We are in a somewhat different circumstance than the University of California on certain aspects of our operations and our enrollment. I would like to say with regard to the $500 million reduction that the statement in the governor's budget summary that's also in your agenda about intending to minimize fee and enrollment impacts by targeting actions that lower the cost of instruction administration, we agree with that entirely as a good operating principle. In that regard, the Chancellor has already announced that in coping with this $500 million proposal that we have no intent of seeking additional fee increases on students beyond the action that was taken last November. The basic arithmetic that we face is if you count those fee increases along with the $500 million, as your agenda indicates, we have a net budget reduction of $351 million. The one missing piece, we have a $49 million increase in mandatory costs, and those are real. We have to reduce some program spending elsewhere in order to accommodate these, and for the most part, it's increases in employee health care premiums. So our basic arithmetic is we're going to have to find about $400 million of spending reductions year to year. We understand that this is not going to be a one-year problem, so we are leaning on our campuses to approach this as a restructuring effort, and they understand that. So there are all kinds of things under consideration to reduce various forms of costs. Situations like restructuring the administration. If you have 8 colleges, if you can collapse them to 6 or 7, you can get rid of an entire tier of administrative overhead. So we're really looking at some transformative changes. There is one thing that I would like to call to your attention, and that is acting on a recommendation that the LAO made. The LAO made an observation that if there are any current year savings that could be returned to the state, that would provide an opportunity to spread this $500 million cut across 2 years, the current year and the budget year. And doing that would introduce, it would ease the burden that we face, the challenge that we face in having to make cuts in 11-12. This is one area where our situation is different than you see. We do have an estimated $75 million of current year savings that comes about because we're short of our enrollment targets. We think that's an opportunity to help the state on cash flow by reverting that $75 million now, and at the same time easing the by $75 million the cut on 11-12. So we hope that that recommendation that we've made could at least get some favorable consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Turnage, for walking us through that. Something for us to consider as we move through the spring months. Ms. Swan?
Yes, thank you. And we would actually be amenable to that as long as the total $500 million savings are achieved.
Okay. It's not before us today, but Senator Liu.
I move the staff recommendation, just like the UC's, the same language to approve the unallocated reductions, and that the university come back to the legislature by March 1st of 2020 and to let us know where these cuts have happened.
That will be plenty of time for us to prepare the report.
Yes, it would be.
All right. Senator LaMalfa and then Senator Huff.
Just a quick question from the university on that. Is it known for sure that you'll achieve $75 million in savings by June, or Could it be a higher number by then as you do your accounting for that, or what do you see that?
I think the estimate, it's not final, but the final number would probably be within 1 or 2 million one way or another. So it's not going to vary greatly from 75 million.
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, did I say? I'm sorry.
Sorry. Yes, LAO.
And just to clarify, the budget bill language in the current year actually requires that funding be returned to the extent that the university doesn't meet its enrollment targets. So it is very clear that amount of funding would have to be returned.
Thank you. Senator Lamont for this? All right. Senator Huff.
It's covered.
All right.
Excuse me,
yes,
Senator Leno, I'm sorry. I just need to be clear about the date, March 1st, 2012.
Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
Yes. So that is the motion, and without objection, it will pass. Page 38 has to do with the enrollment target with the same budget bill language that was put forward for University of California.
I move staff recommendation.
All right. And that passes unanimously. Page 39, again, with the same language that had been approved in budget bill form for the University of California, also for the California State University. Senator Liu.
I move staff recommendation.
That is the motion. All right. So as with the UC vote, it will pass with Democrats voting aye, Republicans voting no.
Okay.
Moving on to the outlay projects.
I move staff recommendation to approve the equipment phase only projects on page 40.
So that's GEO bonds for the capital projects in the last phase. And that passes unanimously, page 40.
Page 41, I move to reject all lease revenue funded projects without prejudice.
Again, allowing us an opportunity to revisit this in the spring.
Understand perfectly. Thank you very much.
All right. Without prejudice.
Right.
Unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Turnage.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So, colleagues, we're going to try and finish up these last pages as quickly as possible. We're on page 42, California Student Aid Commission regarding the continuous expenditure authority for the Student Loan Operating Fund, otherwise known as SLOF. Welcome.
Good afternoon. The governor's proposing that trailer bill language be added to the budget to eliminate the continuous appropriation for the Student Loan Operating Fund. This year, the federal government terminated the guarantee function of the Student Aid Commission. We are in the process currently of transferring the program to an outside vendor, ECMC. This would move about $500,000 in contingency funds into the budget. Those contingency funds are being used to close out the auxiliary formerly known as Ed Fund.
Thank you. Mr. Storm, did you have a comment?
Yes. Ryan Storm with the Department of Finance. We support this language change because, for all intents and purposes, the functions for which the Student Loan Operating Fund was created have since disappeared. The Ed Fund no longer is doing a lot of puts and calls of defaulted student loans. In terms of the $500,000 that Ms. Dinah Michelle mentioned, that could also be handled on a kind of a budget bill basis if you create an item or do that sort of thing in the budget bill in the spring process. But you could act on limiting the continuous appropriation today.
Thank you, Mr. Storm. Senator Huff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We agree that we'll go along with the motion as we believe it's coming, but we do believe that we should, we believe the governor's right that we should repeal the continuous appropriation authority and hope that that's the direction we go and we revisit this.
All right. Thank you, Senator Huff. Senator Liu.
So the motion is to reject the governor's trailer bill language without prejudice for further consideration this spring.
Very good. So give us a little more time to look at this. That is the motion, and it passes unanimously. Ms. Fuentes, everyone's favorite issue here. This is regarding Cal Grants.
Correct.
We had a very robust conversation in the subcommittee. Please proceed.
The policy change here is listed in your agenda indicates that the governor proposes to fully fund Cal Grant. However, it proposes to do so by taking $947 million from the temporary assistance to needy families. We've had discussions with the Department of Social Services, and this can be done. There is no waiver needed or approval of the federal government. And as staff, we are here to assist you if you have any questions on the options.
Thank you, Ms. Fuentes. So we did discuss this in depth at the Budget Subcommittee, and it was revealed to us at that time that whereas a student at a California community college with full Cal Grant support has a maximum grant of $1,151. Correct. But a student going to a private for-profit school could receive a Cal Grant up to $9,708. We tried to determine what the graduation rates were, what the loan default rates were. That information was not forthcoming. And colleagues, this is for a broader conversation, but I thought it was fascinating, having just heard from Hastings, that they are 88% privately funded, 12% publicly funded, and they're considered a public institution. But some of these for-profit private colleges are 90% publicly funded, 10% or less privately funded, and we consider those to be private institutions, and they're making hundreds of millions of dollars with all of this public funding. But we don't know what their graduation rates are. Those who do graduate, and we do have some information that shows they could be as low as 4 or 8% graduation rates. For those lucky enough to graduate, they get diplomas that don't necessarily prepare them or qualify them to take any further testing to get them a professional position. Yeah. So what's proposed here in this trailer bill language is to limit the Cal Grant amount for these private for-profits, if that's in fact what they are, though they are publicly funded indeed, to the same maximum amount for anyone going to a California community college, the $1,551 level. So that's the staff recommendation.
That's for a 2-year school, and then for 4-year programs, right. It's at the CSU level.
Thank you. Thank you for
so I
that.
move the staff recommendation.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
We do have a couple of comments on this issue. One of them is, if the Senate rejects some of the CalWORKs cuts, that then additional savings will be required, but they wouldn't necessarily have to come from the Cal Grants program just because that is where the governor happened to park the federal funds that became available. But certainly Cal Grants are an option, and there are a number of options of how you could achieve savings in Cal Grants. We have some concerns about this particular one. I haven't seen any savings estimates, but it's actually possible that this could end up being more expensive for the state, because the extent to which we subsidize students at the private institutions is actually smaller than even at the community colleges, once you consider the general support we provide to the community colleges and the Cal Grants and the fee waivers. It's about $8,000 per student compared to
the BOG waivers.
The BOG waivers combined with the other state support, compared to an average of about $5,800 per student at the 4-year and 2-year private institutions. So we don't really know what the effects of this would be. It's possible that some students without this support would actually move to the public institutions and in the end cost the state more.
Very good. Senator Lamalfa.
So you're saying that we can't really quantify any kind of savings to the budget by June of 2012, let's say then?
I think it would be very difficult to estimate that, because this proposal would be very likely to change the behavior of students.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Very good. We had a comment over here. Senator Lowenthal.
Yeah. While I realize you may not be able to do the total impact, how much, just in terms of based upon last year, how much savings would be if we gave the same number of grants out? Or, I mean, how much do we know what the savings would be just based upon Cal Grant allocation?
One way to answer that, sorry, I didn't introduce myself, Judy Hyman from the Legislative Analyst's Office. If the exact same number of students went to the proprietary institutions and got Cal grants, and those grants were $1,551 instead of what their current average is, the savings would be potentially $30 million in that range. However, it's very unlikely that all of those students would continue to go to the institutions if they didn't have support for tuition. Many would be likely to at least try to transfer to the public institutions if there were room available. So you'd have to figure in those costs as well.
The public policy question that surrounds this, that if those students did find themselves redirected to community colleges, that the likelihood that they would graduate would increase significantly and that their diploma would have some value.
I strongly support this. I'm just trying to understand the total impact, and we don't have any of that data, but I think that this is definitely a step in the right direction.
Okay. Senator Huff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are some legitimate concerns raised on this, but it's like throwing out the baby with the bathwater in that there are some very highly functioning, well-run private schools. Just because they're for-profit shouldn't make them evil. Perhaps a better approach would be a more comprehensive approach. Certainly listening to the LAO, we could end up costing ourselves more money by doing what we're proposing to do today. And I would suggest that we have no problem with making cuts or efficiencies in the Cal Grant program, but if we're just going to punish a certain segment of our education group, that doesn't make sense. I'd suggest the LAO bring back to us some efficiencies we can do within the Cal Grant program, and then we defer action today, but act upon that during conference committee.
Okay. Senator Alquist.
Thank you. Just one comment, and that is that it seems to me that when we give money to the private institutions, that they need to give us data. And I don't understand why we continue to give money when we don't get the kind of information that we need to make good decisions.
Because we don't have a policy.
Senator,
we don't have a policy. Thank you, Senator Luke. We don't have a policy, and I think we need to have a policy.
We couldn't agree with you more, Senator. There are some changes in federal regulations and also some new state requirements for institutions to begin reporting outcome data. And we think it would be a good approach to tie participation in the Cal Grant program to those outcomes, and that's something we would be happy to work with you on.
Yes, I would like to see some policy on that. I think it should be a condition of receiving money that you provide the outcome data that we need.
And that would be a very good way to address concerns about quality.
Senator Alquist, if I may just focus on some of the suggestions that were made in the subcommittee, is that we have an institutional participation agreement process that requires, in order to participate in the Cal Grant program, that institutions meet certain criteria. And as Senator Liu has indicated, we have not had a process in California because we had a suspension of the state framework for accountability for private post-secondary. And under legislation last year, as you know, AB 48 was put into place. The federal government has ruled and will be promulgating final regulations in this area. There are a number of issues related to consumer protection that we need to look at in the policy venue, and the Commission would like to work with you to strengthen oversight in this area.
I would love to see that, and particularly as you and I worked together on the California Post-Secondary Education Commission some years ago, I would be very happy to do this with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Fuentes, for your assistance on this. You've already had your comment?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, not here to demonize anybody. All we're saying is that the maximum Cal Grant amount would be the same for the private institutions as for our community colleges for the 2-year program, and no more than the CSU grant for a 4-year program. And again, with no negative comment here, it's just an opinion that if a business model for a for-profit institution is dependent upon 90% of public support, that is not much of a business model. That is the definition of corporate welfare. So the vote on this is Democrats aye, and abstention for the Republican members.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me,
Yes.
Steve Boylard, the analyst. For recording purposes, are you scoring any savings with that?
Yes, staff tells me that would be a scoring of $40 million.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, please note that Senator Anderson is voting no. So moving on to page 44. Thank you, Ms. Fuentes. Page 44, colleagues, is a vote-only item in Health and Human Services. New budget bill language. This is to allow the legislature to ensure that any authorized increases are consistent with the legislature's intent as enacted by the budget. Recommendation is that the addition of the following sentence to the proposed budget bill language be added. And this is all about allowing for advance notification. Any such increases shall occur no sooner than 30 days after notification in writing of the necessity, therefore, to the chairpersons of the fiscal committees of each house of the legislature and the chairperson of the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, or not sooner than whatever lesser time the chairperson of the Joint Committee or his or her designee may in each instance determine. So again, this is allowing for advance notification. And I think you're okay with that? All right, and that will pass without objection. Page 45 is the Department of Aging. The proposal is to eliminate the multi-purpose senior services program. Savings proposed is $19.9 million. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm Laura Conley, the Acting Director for the Department of Aging. And this has been heard but held open in the subcommittee meetings. The governor's budget does propose a $19.9 million general fund savings by eliminating the multi-purpose senior services program, which we refer in brief as MSSP. And in making this proposed elimination, it by no way negatively reflects on the program, the dedicated staff at the local level, our 41 local contractors who provide this service or the services that are provided to individuals who are in this home and community-based waiver. It's simply a reflection of the very, very difficult times that we're in and our budget realities. In terms of the implementation of this elimination, it would require trailer bill language. It would also require the Department of Health Care Services, as the single state Medicaid agency, to contact the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid to make them aware of the fact that we would be terminating this home and community-based Medicaid waiver. We, Department of Aging, would need to notify the 41 local contractors that we currently have contracts with that we're terminating these contracts. And at the local level, those agencies would then need to work with the clients in the program to make them aware of the fact that this program was being eliminated and review the current situation of the clients in the program as to whether they could, what their current needs are there other resources in the community, or are there other arrangements that should be made in terms of alternative options for them. Originally, this was proposed as being effective June 1st, so with a March 1st enactment of the budget. So there's $160,000 general fund scored for current year as well. So all of this would need to happen by the end of May.
Sorry, we have a number of comments from committee members, starting with Senator Alquist.
Thank you. It will be with a heavy heart that I support the recommendation, but I do request that the department give to our chair a transitional plan so that we really understand how seniors will be supported in an effort to have good care.
We're doing the LAO's recommendation.
Okay. So it's just we're just reducing it by $5 million?
The recommendation is,
Elimination.
well, the recommendation,
Right. Just got a little clarification. A little clarification here. The recommendation is to accept the LAO's proposal. Why don't we have the LAO walk us through that?
yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ginny Bello with the Analyst's Office. Most of the MSSP recipients, over 90% of them, are also recipients of the state's in-home supportive services program. So we're suggesting that if you are considering reductions to the IHSS program, which we are recommending that you do, that you also consider maintaining the infrastructure of the MSSP program to support those high-need IHSS recipients who are also MSSP recipients. That said, there is a need to achieve general fund savings, so we do recommend that you reduce the funding for the MSSP program by $5 million general fund, and at the same time direct the department to begin negotiating with the federal government to find ways to reduce the operating costs of the MSSP waiver to allow the program to manage this reduction with the least impact on recipients. If the operational costs aren't able to be reduced in those negotiations with the federal government, there will be a reduction in the number of people served in the MSSP program.
Okay, so given that the MSSP is a case management assistance, that as we are trimming services left and right, it'd be a good idea to have someone there to find something in some other direction, somewhere, somehow, so that we can keep these folks in their homes. All right. So that is the motion. Senator Huff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're prepared to support, we recognize it's difficult. These are good programs, but we're prepared to support the governor's cuts. That's not what we're considering here, so we will go along and vote aye.
Very good, thank you. So that will pass unanimously. The next item, thank you, Ms. Turnage. Sorry, that wasn't your name. What's your name? Ms. Connolly, I'm sorry. Colleagues, page 46 is a vote-only item. This is with regard to the California Child Support Automation System, and the recommendation is to approve the governor's amended proposals for this system.
So moved.
That is the motion, and that will pass unanimously. Page 47 is the Department of Child Support Services. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Linda Adams, the Chief Financial Officer for the department. This proposal proposes to reduce $24 million in county child support collections as we shift them over to the state general fund. These are currently parents with child support orders who receive public assistance payments, assign their rights to child support payments to the state. When child support is received on behalf of those clients, the aid is repaid in proportionate to the feds, the state, and the county governments. And so this is proposing to shift the county share to state share.
Thank you. This is definitely going to raise some concerns from the counties as we're in the midst of our realignment conversation. So I'm going to suggest, colleagues, that we hold this page open for tomorrow's realignment discussion. Thank you very much. Moving on to the Department of Social Services. Page 48. Another very painful proposal here regarding further cuts to SSI, SSP. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman Leno and members of the committee. First of all, my name is John Wagner. I'm the Director of the Department of Social Services, and I think your comments are very well taken. This first proposal on the agenda is not one that the Department or the administration or I think anyone in this room would want to have to put forward if it weren't for the difficult fiscal challenges we're facing. Having said that, this proposal does cover the population known as SSI, SSP. These are elderly, disabled, low-income individuals. And the proposal would reduce the average maximum amount for individuals down to the federal maintenance of effort level. I think the description that the committee consultant wrote up is excellent. The general effect of that would be a reduction, a net reduction of $15, moving the grant amount from $845 down to $830. This will impact roughly 1 million individuals receiving SSI, SSP benefits. Just to put this in context, last year's budget reduced the amount for couples down to the federal minimum, and this is covering the individual population. The final point I think I'd just like to highlight is there, in addition to impacting 1 million individuals, there will be roughly 8,500 individuals who, because of their resources, are receiving close to that $15, and so by removing the benefit or moving the benefit down, they will no longer be eligible, although they potentially are eligible for CalFresh, the state's food stamp program. And this would translate to $15 million in savings in this current year and $177 million for budget year.
Colleagues, as distasteful as this proposal is, if there's anything to mitigate what we're doing, it's that, and Mr. Wagner, you correct me if I'm wrong, this, as proposed, does take us to the federal minimum, and that any future federal cost of living adjustments would no longer allow us to capture, we the state, those federal dollars, which I know we've been doing in recent years.
With that.
Mr. Chair, Pete Chervinko with Department of Social Services. You're correct. In prior years, the state was able to reduce its contribution when the federal COLA was set through to achieve general fund savings without impacting the overall combined total grant received by these individuals. Once the federal side goes, once the state side is at the federal minimum, any federal COLA couldn't be offset by a further reduction in state general fund.
And would go directly to the recipients.
That's correct. The grant will go up based on the federal COLA going forward.
Very good. Any comments, questions? Senator Lowenthal.
I don't understand, and maybe I just need, we're reducing the grant, putting more people into poverty, and because of that, we're cutting off people. How did that happen? 8,500 people are now, with this reduction, going to be left off the program. They barely could make it with the program before, and why are they?
These are people who have their own income that is at such a level that they're only getting $15 from us, from the program. So once we get to this level, they will be sustained by their own income. So these are people, rather than getting in the $845 range to $830 range.
But at $845 with their own income, before what they were.
No, they're only getting about 15. So most of these folks are getting $850. These are people who are only getting 15.
Mr. Chair,
so we're going to drop them down $15. They won't be in the program anymore.
Mr. Chair, if I may, perhaps by way of explanation, what we're talking about is reducing the maximum payment standard to the minimum smallest ceiling allowed by the federal government. But there's a whole range of the grant levels based on outside income and other things. There's a whole range of the actual dollars received by people. All we're proposing is to reduce the cap, which means that due to outside income, there are some households that have a very small grant. And this reduction in that ceiling takes the people with very, very small grants off the program at the back end.
Is that helpful? Okay. So again, not pleasant at all in any way. The recommendation to accept this cut and the savings of $177 million has been moved, and that will pass unanimously. Mr. Wagner, page 49.
Mr. Chairman and members, this is another consequential and difficult proposal for covering a population of youth who are former foster youth. This proposal covers the Transitional Housing Program Plus. This is a program that offers supports to former foster youth aged 18 up to 24 years of age. The budget proposes a $19 million reduction. This $19 million represents about 54% of the current funding that goes into THP Plus. THP Plus, as it currently exists, funds about 1,200 beds across the state of California and about 52 counties. And over the course of the year, about 2,200 youth are served in the 1,200 beds. So if you translate the 54% reduction on the number of beds, it's roughly reducing the capacity over the course of the year to reducing 650 beds out of the 1,200. So that's just over half of the program. One thing I think that is important to note is that with the state's passage and enactment of AB 12, California will be phasing in additional supports and resources for foster youth beyond age 18. But that is a phased-in approach, and AB 12, beginning January 1st, 2012, will allow supports to foster youth up to 19, and then on January of 2013, the following year, up to age 20. So there will be a period of time where youth, where there will be a gap, but ultimately 18 and 19-year-olds should have access to the additional supports of AB 12.
But the situation, given the phase-in of the federal support up to age 21, is such that if we took this action today, there would be 18 and 19-year-olds currently housed who would suddenly lose their housing.
And that, as I mentioned, the capacity is reduced across the entire program, so it would really be up to the counties to prioritize who is served in the remaining beds.
Right.
They could continue to serve 18 and 19-year-olds. We know that those are the, demographically, those youth are served at higher numbers, so that would be up to the county to manage that reduced capacity.
Okay, so out of concern that we could have youth who are currently housed as a result of the state support potentially could find themselves once again homeless. And so the recommendation is to, rather than take this $19 million savings, that we approve a $5 million reduction and then reject the remainder of the $14,000. But then also to include some budget bill language, which would have intent language to ensure that no beds are lost while we transition to the federal benefit. So that's the recommendation.
Well said, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Huffman?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Similarly, we're prepared to cut, similar to my comments before, we're prepared to do the governor's cuts, but we will support the level of trimming that you're proposing today.
Very good. That is noted. Yes, Senator Wright.
In social services, have you considered in this program redirecting some of the money that we do in block grants, working with locals in their Section 8 program, and then expanding that to work with private apartment owners who might be able to provide this housing at a lower cost? If you combined all three for this population, I mean, in Los Angeles, you've got people that have apartments that might be prepared to take a reduced fee if it were guaranteed. So then the only thing you would need would be the cooperation of the social service agency and the redirect block grant money that's going to be cut by the feds. But to coordinate it in a different way than looking at it as a general fund obligation, but funding it as a social service obligation with money that comes from HUD.
So we'd be happy to work with you in your office and explore additional options. But the issue is with this program, the way THP works is these funds are provided to the counties, and the counties negotiate the local contracts with providers, and including the supports that are provided for these youth. So it's got to be the right mix of benefits for youth, especially this population who is transitioning out or has transitioned out of foster care. If there are ways to better leverage and bring those things together at the local level, we're happy to explore that and pass anything on to our county partners.
I mean, if I'm taking the chair's point. I mean, if you said to someone who was 19 that your option is sleeping under a freeway off-ramp, or perhaps sleeping indoors with a reduction in the services that would be provided, I would think we would err on the side of trying to provide the place for him to sleep, even if we couldn't provide the requisite social service. I don't deny that the social service is valid, but we're talking about kicking him to the curb as opposed to being able to provide the service. I mean, we won't resolve it today, but I would hope we would explore other ways of providing the shelter, and if we're not able to provide the social service, then we would do that. But let's, at a minimum, try to provide the shelter if possible.
And just to underscore, in this proposal, the proposal is a reduced capacity, and it really is up to and provides the flexibility for the counties to manage that capacity, reduced capacity along the lines of to the best of their ability. So it's not dictating that there's a one-size-fits-all approach to just kicking certain populations to the street, as you described it.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Wagner and colleagues. The other thing that we'll be doing by reducing the cut here is preserving the infrastructure so that when the federal dollars do arrive, as they are phased in, that we'll have beds and facilities to house these youth. So that's another benefit in this motion, and it passes unanimously. I want to congratulate the committee. We're now 2/3 of the way through. Probably made more than 50% of our cuts, and tomorrow will be a very full day. So we are starting probably within 10 minutes or so after we conclude session. And we'll move as quickly as possible because I know there will be folks having to leave for the weekend. We stand adjourned. Thank you.